Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with my old friend Jamarl Thomas from Sputnik. We got a lot to talk about. Let's talk. That's weird. That's okay. It doesn't want to go to Rumble, so we won't worry about it.
Rumble is a bit more complicated. It's almost like you had to go to Rumble.
Yeah, well, I had it on Rumble, but it said it doesn't want to go to Rumble. So whatever. Oh, I see what's going on. You know what's going on? No, I don't. Actually, who cares? We're on YouTube. Who cares? We are on YouTube doing our thing. I mean, Rumble, we'll get there. Dude, I'll run it later on. At any rate, so here's what's happening for you, those of you who haven't figured it out yet on either of our channels. Jamarl and I are doing a weekly news roundup, and we're running it on both of our channels at the same time. So that's going to be cool. Welcome everybody over at Jamarl Thomas channel and everybody here. Man, we got a whole bunch of stuff going on. I don't even know where to start. But let's start here. Your thoughts, domestic policy. Start your story of the week. If you had to start one, the domestic policy, Democrats, Trump, whatever, domestic policy. What do you see as your biggest story? Or even the most doesn't have to be the biggest. The most interesting story of the week.
One of the most interesting. You and I talked about it yesterday, and it had to do with the selection of Jerry Connolly. Now, when we talked about the story, you made the point of saying, okay, Democrats are going back to identity politics and choosing this guy. And that's true, because Jen Psaki was effectively going after Nancy Pelosi for doing it, saying, look, I love Pelosi. Pelosi is great. Mama Bear, everybody loves Mama Bear. But we shouldn't have chosen Jerry Connolly.
Just so people that don't know.
Over AOC.
It was AOC and Jerry Connolly trying to go for this position, a ranking position on one of the committees.
Congressional oversights.
Right.
Let me see. I'm trying to find the exact.
Right. And the basically the powers that be in the party stepped in and squished AOC out of the way and put Jerry Connolly, a guy who I happen to have met before, but he's a very wealthy guy from Northern Virginia. Those two things go together, don't they? Wealthy and Northern Virginia. Anyway, and being in Congress.
So the reason I point this out is because you are right. It may have a lot to do with identity politics. I think some of it has to do with youth, like basically saying you've chosen another old guy as opposed to this young woman who, is very good on YouTube, Instagram, social media, and everything else. And so then I went to hear something that Jerry Connolly said, and I'm going to play this. This is quite possibly the most ridiculous choice for this position you could come up with. I want you to listen to what he says here. And keep in mind, this is a communications position. So you have to be open. You have to be talking to the cameras. You have to be getting the Democratic message out. That is the job. Listen to what he says. Let me pull this.
I love the. I'm all for. I'm a wonk. I love the abstract. I love the academic. I've got colleagues for whom the job is performative. Has nothing to do with legislative achievement. It has to do with bloviating on the floor or getting on cable television or something. But it's not about legislative achievement. That's the last thing in the world they want to do.
I don't think he realizes that his job is that. Like, meaning, if you're, look, there's certain parts of Congress that has a lot to do with doing legislative work. Great. No issue. That's your job. But part of the job of many of these positions is also getting the message out. Like, meaning I'm coming out to you and I'm giving you democratic message of this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. The opposition is nonsense. They're, whatever. Meaning that bloviating is part of your job. And so for him to say, yeah, these people are bloviating or they're going on media and everything else. So what is he going to do? Just not do media? When his job is media? I get the sense that when you're talking about like this kind of new age and this new age of social media and everything else, I would wager to you that Connolly's vision of this is you go on TV, you may give a statement, and that's the end of it. When that is not the way media works today, social media like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, media is that today. When Elon Musk came on and said legacy media is dead, Elon Musk on some level was right. when they're looking at, when they're looking for news, they're on Twitter, they're on YouTube, they're on all of this stuff. So if Connolly, who is 78, going on 80 years old,
perfect age for the Democratic Party. He's a little young.
Right.
He's a little young for the Democratic Party. When you say a little spry for the Democratic Party, they usually like them octogenarians and up.
Yeah, Pelosi and the type and the looks. I guess my point is, like, regardless of how Jensaki got to that point, you choosing somebody who's nearly 80 years old to be the face of the media and everything else in the Democratic Party is absurd. And you have to wonder, why would you choose him over her? And I wonder if it's because, all things being equal, regardless of how much AOC sucks up to the party, regardless of how much AOC shed what got her there, because keep in mind, AOC at the beginning was like, we need to primary some folks. We need to get some people out of here. That is not her today. She's a good little soldier today. But they still don't trust her. They still don't trust her.
You know what? I got to say this, too. I haven't been around the Democrats. He represents their thought pattern. You know, the technocrat?
Yeah.
He's the technocrat. Why we must be about the achievement. What did we achieve? And what consensus did we come to? Did we, talk to some guys with pie charts and graphs? Pie charts and graphs, for God's sake. That's what we need to move ahead. More pie charts. He's the same guy. And I'm saying not him, but the iteration of the death of the Democratic Party that says to people, when people say, I can't afford my rent, and they say, we got this website with pie charts and graphs, dude.
Right.
All you need to do is go to that website, look at the pie charts and graphs, and you'll realize that economically you're in better shape, notwithstanding certainly all of your credit cards are maxed out. You're about to get put out. You can't afford anything. You know what I mean? Your car is getting repossessed. Forget all of that. Go to our website and look at these pie charts and graphs, dude. And that is the death of the Democratic Party. Now, let's be honest about it. If they put AOC forward, her job is to look different and to, whine for censorship and cheer for the intelligence. Don't get me wrong. They're going to do the same thing.
Oh, I'm not saying,
but I mean,
I'm not saying that the party is different. I'm just saying their reasoning for putting him there. Look, you're right about the party. I'm sorry. Please.
Yeah, but I'll say this. So I look at it as with him as actually, ironically, he's a better representation of the Democratic Party. He really is. He's a better representation of an old fogey. Who, and you know what? When he seems angry, doesn't he have that get off my lawn look to him?
He does.
It's like, these stupid young technocrats.
It's like a white Uncle Ruckus.
And they think you just got to talk, and they're throwing their frisbee on your stupid lawn. If that frisbee comes on my lawn one more time, I'm not giving it back, kids. I'm not giving it back. So I'm sick of these young people coming around here with their notions and ideas and stuff. Let's pass something. And once we pass it, then we'll tell those stupid voters, you better do what you're told. Or us. He represents an angry old man. That's the Democratic Party, an angry old dude who's shaking his fist at the kids who are riding around. They're just trying to have fun, man. They're just trying to ride up down the neighborhood and throw a ball. Why are you so mad at the kids, dude? That's all I understand. He's angry at the kids.
He's literally angry at people giving speeches in Congress. He's like
talking to those people out there like Trump. What are you, a bunch of Trumpers talking to the working class?
Talking our head off, like that. Look, I think you're right though. He is the face. He's a good face of it. I mean, these guys are old. These guys are ancient. When they got rid of Nancy Pelosi and put in Hakeem Jeffries, does anybody really believe that Nancy Pelosi is not pulling strings?
Exactly.
Do they really believe that? Mama Bear going into that good night? I don't buy that at all.
He flew on the plane with her, remember, to Taiwan?
Did he?
With her to Taiwan. And then she got off, and when she looked to the right, he looked to the right. When she looked to the left, I'm like, dude, you are so humiliating. Everybody black is looking at you like, man, you look like some kind of a step and fetch it, following behind her. It was pathetic to look at that man. And now, so now, here's the thing, too, with Hakeem and AOC, in a way, I'd rather have that guy.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to have some neocon, a Zionist, warmongering neoliberal, let's make it a genuine one. Don't put a happy face. Don't put a smiley face on it. Just put some oxygenarian, angry, get off my lawn person, and let's move on. At least we can see what we got.
Yeah. It's like, you know what you're getting with Connolly. You know what you're getting.
I met him. So in one of my former lives, the company that I worked for, the really, really rich people, they'd always send me, because I'm former law enforcement, to do cameras and security on their homes and stuff like that, right? And one of them was Jerry Connolly. Another one was he was building a new home. It was unbelievable. He's really, really rich. In DC, shockingly. The other one is what's his name? He owns all of the he owns a whole bunch of car dealerships. I think it's that Don Byer.
Oh,
Don Byer?
Yeah, I know him.
Yes. So that was one. His brother Mike, who actually runs all the dealerships, was another one of my customers. And Don Byer's in. I don't know why all these rich guys. Yeah, he owns all the Mike. But the bottom line is this: actually, Mike Byer was a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But my point being, ultimately, when it comes down to think about that, an older dude who's really, really rich, who's in Congress, just, I guess, what do you, if you're worth all of this money, what are you in Congress for? For more power, prestige? I don't know. But let me ask you this: who could represent the Democratic Party better right now?
I gotta be honest. I think Democrats need to reconcile this thing that their image is bad, and their image is bad because they don't necessarily represent what they stand for. And whether you put in an AOC, whether you put in a Connolly, whether you put in, pick random Democrat that you're going to add into a particular space. If the device itself is not changed in the way that people see it, then none of it's really going to matter, right? It's like all of this stuff is just optics. Hey, how can we we're going to put a young Hispanic woman here, and that is going to convey what? What are you conveying with the young Hispanic woman? That you've moved, that you've changed, that you've become younger. It's like, yeah, but what are your policies? Like, it's not like they continuously mistaken this notion of how it looks for what it does, and the issue is what it does.
Yeah, because it's all about the fraud. It's all like a Hollywood thing going on. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let's put on a show so people don't know that we're genocidal ghouls. Let's pretend like we're looking out for the working class guy so they don't know that we're skinning them alive economically and giving all of their money to the rich. There was one, I wanted to find it, if I can find it, a video. I had it set up a few minutes ago on your channel, and it was Chuck Todd. There we go.
Yes, Chuck Todd.
Let me find it.
I have that video if you want. Actually, let me see.
Hold on.
I was watching that thing earlier today. I was laughing at it. I mean, that video is fantastic. Because it gets across something that's very straightforward, like on my channel that I used to point out, that it's like, regardless of who you are talking to, Democrats have this kind of weird way of slicing up demographics. And it's like, for Black people, I'm going to give them something about jail, which I find to be so racist. Hispanics,
let's get a bunch of Black voters. What are you going to do? Let's talk about jail. They're all
let's talk about jail. We're going to have jail reform.
You kind of look like racist when you're only relating to, hey, what about the Hispanic vote? Let's go with tacos.
Right. It sounds so racist, right? When they say it, and they do it all the time.
So we're going to try to find, I love this. We're going to try to find, give me a second. There we go. So everybody, we're going to watch Chuck Todd and listen to what he has to say about why the Democrats lost. I think it's critical.
It is.
To understand not why the Democrats lost, but the point I'm going to make, and I'll throw this to you, is the self-serving nature of all of their arguments, okay? So let's listen to Chuck Todd talk about the Hispanic vote or something crazy like that.
When he was given information about the election itself, and I want to make a very clear point, they had this information during the election. They had this information during the election. And in no way did this information change the way Kamala Harris ran her campaign. This is Chuck Todd.
This is always my favorite part about a post-election is the losing side suddenly shares memos that they never would have shared with you. And I got one from a
Molly brought some today.
Right. A strategist for a Biden super PAC circa 2022. sent me a polling memo that he had sent to the campaign, and there was a single. He wanted me to note a single observation that he had made at the end, and it was having to do with the Latino vote. And what was interesting, they were asking all sorts of questions, and they were testing the democracy question. And one of the things that popped out to this source of mine, and he put it in his memo and he circled it to make sure I didn't miss it, was that Hispanics believed in a strong presidency. They were more open to a strong presidency. And in fact, were more, so this idea of the authoritarianism and this and that. And there was another aspect to it. The democracy message really didn't ring true with Latino voters, especially if they're first or second gen. Because first, you want to see a democracy crumbling? Let me introduce you to El Salvador. You want to see a democracy that doesn't work? Let me introduce you to Venezuela.
Let me stop right there. I'll tell you why. That is the equivalent of you know what that's equivalent of? Black males. A lot of black men voted for Trump, and I, beforehand, but this is going to sound shocking. I talked to some black men and said, "Why are you voting for Trump?" And most of them said the same thing. Man, things are too high, and when he was in, it was cheaper. We'll give him a shot. They didn't love Trump. They didn't hate Trump. It was actually a very practical decision, right? I'll be willing to bet there was a lot of Hispanics doing the same thing. But here's what's interesting. What did they say? Black people, then these black men are a bunch of, remember this? They're misogynist. They did because they don't like a woman. So they attacked the black men and they insulted him. What did he just do? Why is it that Hispanics didn't vote? Well, they want authoritarian dictatorship, right?
Yeah.
It was
like, well, they don't mind
democracy. Yeah. Well, they were like, well, El Salvador is a dictatorship. And you want to talk about a democracy that doesn't work? Maduro in Venezuela. Well, wait a minute. Venezuela was doing really well economically. Mm-hmm. The United States maximum sanctions on Venezuela destroyed 99% of its gross domestic product. We sanctioned away 99% of their gross domestic product, and Chuck Todd says their democracy doesn't work. How well would ours work if we lost 99%? So to me, in the same way that they attacked black voters, men, and said they voted for Trump because they're a bunch of misogynist woman haters, he's attacking Hispanics, saying they don't like democracy. Why they're fine with, now, what did he say? They like a strong president. Okay, nothing wrong with that. And he goes, this question of authoritarianism, wait, whoa. Do you remember Bill Clinton used to say, better strong and wrong than weak and right?
And
right?
That's right.
So, okay, because if a woman says, well, I want to date a man and I want to make sure I get a strong kind of guy, that doesn't mean she wants a mean guy that's going to beat the hell out of her.
That doesn't mean you want a dictator.
God's going to make some decisions. She doesn't want to, maybe she wants a guy with a camouflage hat on that likes deer hunting or something. I don't know, whatever her idea of it is, right?
Yeah.
But he takes Hispanics saying, we want a strong president, nothing wrong with that, turns that into they want authoritarianism, and then goes to the neocon trope to start attacking Venezuela. That's why the Democrats can't be fixed, because he has to go with the neocon foreign policy. They can't question their foreign policy. They have to double down on it, and black voters are misogynist, and now we know, thanks to Chuck Todd, that Hispanic voters are authoritarian.
Okay with dictatorships, right? He didn't say that they wanted the dictatorship, but they were just okay with it.
Yeah.
Like basically, they're fine with it if it comes out that way. Here's the thing, though. I don't think that's a Democrat thing. I think that's an American thing. Like when I used the intro and fault lines, I used to say, a context lens for the American point of view. What you just gave was a context lens for the American point of view. Like Chuck Todd, like in an American audience, that just goes over with no issue. It's understood. It's accepted, almost like, air to lungs. If you were in a different country, not so much, right? It's the American audience that gets that, eats that up, and just accepts that as normal. For example, I was around this Trump supporter, this Democrat once, and he said, yeah, Trump is a criminal. I said, well, what do you have to prove that with? Now, nobody has ever asked them that because everybody he sent it to were Democrats. It's kind of like that with Chuck Todd. He could say that. There's no pushback. It's accepted because an American point of view accepts that as a normal rhetoric in the way that we talk about these other countries. I agree with you. I agree with you.
And add this. Now, he then goes on to say it's about, well, let's look at the rest of what he says. Because some of the stuff he says makes sense, but there's some holes in it. Let's just go.
At the end, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Let's go to the rest and see what else old Chuck Fraud, as Randy Granico calls it, Chuck Fraud, what Chuck Fraud has to say.
And so it was one of those things that the Hispanic voters want a strong presidency, and they were more open to it, which was sort of this at the time. He was right, like Trump may make more inroads here than you think. And then the other aspect of Latino voters is that the Trump campaign targeted them on the same issues they were targeting working class white voters.
Mm-hmm.
And the Harris campaign targeted them as a community of color. And that's where I think the disconnect has sort of, and it's sort of like going forward, I think it's pretty clear class is the big divide in American politics, not identity. And I think I think both parties are sort of now get that in many ways. And I suspect a different sort of Democratic messaging in the next 4 years because of that.
I think both parties don't get it.
You know how frustrating it is for him to say that? I mean, because it's like, I listen to it, it's like, well, no duh. Like, why would, like, look, man, if I am black, white, gay, straight, hermaphrodite, transvestite, whatever, I got to pay my bills. I got to pay for my car, got to pay for my insurance, got to pay for my house, got to pay for, my childcare. All of that is going to come first before anything else. And yet they're like, well, we're going to cut people up into these divisions and we're going to focus on issues of identity as opposed to, issues of wallet. How do you miss that? Like, how it's the economy, stupid. It's like every 4 years, somebody has to be told it's the economy, stupid.
But let me ask you this. Here's the problem I think they have. It's kind of a cultish problem. If the Democratic Party argued we're doing this for political reasons so we can, get more votes, they could just change. But they've taken this moral position. We do this because we're morally superior to the rest of you Trumpers, and you should, if you're not a Trumper, you should be a Trumper, right?
Yeah.
So when you take a position that what you're doing is moral and righteous, this pious self-righteousness, you can't do a U-turn on that, can you? It's like people are saying to Hollywood, look, you keep making these movies, and every one of them has 3 or 4 a diverse group of female superheroes that have no flaws, 0 flaws, right? And they're so powerful, they just beat up everything. And people are like, yeah, but okay, fine, one movie like that's good, but come on, can't we do something else here, right? And they're like, well, no, we can't, because this is the righteous thing to do. And we can't do anything that wouldn't be right. Once you take a moral position, you kind of paint yourself in a corner because you've argued that you're doing it because you're moral. So to change would be immoral, or to admit that you were full of crap all along.
Yeah. I mean, but like that is, that's like America saying they're indispensable. I mean, it's just what you tell yourself, right? It's like, it's not cosmic. God did come in and say, we bestow this upon you. I mean, they don't even have a book saying God bestowed it upon you. They just taken the position. And I don't even give them the whole moral thing. I mean, let's be honest. The Democratic Party at one point was an economic populist party. And they decided we are going to take a huge amount of money from vendors and donors, and we are going to tweak our policies in the direction for those donors. And it just so happened that if you tweak your party in the direction of those donors, okay, what do the donors want? They want more money. They want more control. Yeah. And so it's like they intentionally went with this notion of race, identity, sex, and let's split that stuff up. And we're going to call that what it means to be the left. Right. As opposed to this economic stuff, because the economic stuff adversely affected the donors and the money that they wanted to get from those donors. Like this was policy. This wasn't, when Chuck Schumer I even got that video where Chuck Schumer said, well, for every lefty we lose, we can get a moderate Republican in Indiana or whatever the hell. Okay, well, that's what Kamala Harris did. Kamala Harris went with Liz Cheney. She went from pillar to post. She did everything in her power to get these kind of moderate Republicans that were tired of Donald Trump with the idea that I don't need the lefties. Hell, she didn't even go for the left, right? She just the international crime, the border, $25,000 just in case you want a house. It's like, okay, what if I don't want a house? Okay, well, sucks for you, bro.
The most lethal military. That's the one I love. The most lethal military, and we'll stick with Israel no matter what.
Yep, genocide, all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, how's the left in any part of this? You know, and then they say the left is at fault. The left is not at fault. You've slivered or sliced off this kind of economic populism with this and called this other stuff about wokeness and transgender kid surgeries and transgender surgeries in prisons. You did all that nonsense. You said, well, that's what it means to be the left. No, it's not. It's not. They did that on purpose. That's not a moral position. Yeah.
The left.
The left's right. The left's left. It's absurd. And they did that on purpose. They didn't want, look, it's one thing if they went with a Sanders type argument, right? Healthcare, education, we want to expand, so forth. You may dislike Sanders, but you believe him. He's a true believer. And I would wager to you that people would prefer somebody who they believe, where they think the guy believes that. But, through and through, whether he can get it done or not, that guy fully believes what he's saying and it's coming out of his mouth, as opposed to this kind of milquetoast, impotent, not really getting anything done Democratic Party that I don't believe is good for anybody. They did that stuff on purpose. They can call themselves more moral. I don't know how they do that, but they can do it.
So let's take this the same way, in the same way that I argue that it's hard for the Democrats to do a U-turn because they dug their heels in. They're like, yes, we've got to do, everything's got to be seen through the lens of gender and race and all that stuff. Got to. Sorry, we can't make a U-turn. Okay, let's take that into foreign policy.
Oh,
Putin invaded Ukraine because let's see, it was unprovoked.
Right.
Also because he wanted to expand the Soviet Union and rebuild that.
He wants to take over all of Europe.
He hates democracy. That's right. He ain't going to stop until he gets to the English Channel.
Right.
and I've heard that he hates democracy. He doesn't want a thriving democracy on his board. Anyway, all of these things, he did it because he's pure evil, right?
Right.
Now along comes Trump, and Trump's like, I want out. I want out. This ain't mine. And plus, these people, they got me. And I think there's some of this, Trump. And plus, these are the people that got me impeached for when I was doing nothing wrong. They did everything they could to screw him. And let's face it, some guy ended up on the fifth hole at Mar-a-Lago who just came from Ukraine. So you gotta see that possibly there was some input from the SBU or whatever the hell they are. They literally tried to kill him.
Yeah.
I don't think he looks kindly towards them, and a lot of people bring this up. Dick Kavanaugh always bring this up. I mean, our buddy Jim Kavanaugh always brings this up.
Right.
You sit down and talk with Vladimir Putin to get a deal done, which is what has to be done, to acknowledge that Russia has legitimate security concerns, right? Is also the same kind of U-turn, isn't it? It's to admit that all of it was a lie. Isn't it?
Well, it's humiliating. I mean, you spend $300 billion and you come up with all of these myths. It was unprovoked campaign of Vladimir Putin, who wants to take over all of Europe with 150,000 people. That's how many people they went in with. It wasn't even enough people to hold Ukraine. And they're like, he's trying to take over all of Europe with 150,000 soldiers. It's like, okay, this is nonsense, right? And then you start thinking to yourself, okay, well, you've expanded NATO to their border, not the other way around. You've had Angela Merkel and Hollande come out saying it was fake. We lied. The Minsk agreements weren't real. We just did those agreements, meaning agreements that were supposed to end the conflict were used in order to provoke a conflict, basically to give Ukraine time enough to build this massive military on the Russian border, to which they used to kill ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And the moment that they start killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians, they pretended like they weren't Ukrainians. This was literally a civil war that Russia got involved in because A, it was on their border, and B, they were killing ethnic Russian Ukrainians. And the West was like, well, they don't have any real security concerns. And so it's like, so during the Cuban Missile Crisis, so if Russia knocked over Mexico and put in intelligence, missiles, they paid for all of this massive military buildup, and they were aiming it at America, America would be like, well, Mexico is its own country. You can do whatever it wants.
Right.
Of course, they wouldn't act that way. They didn't act that way during the Cuban Missile Crisis because we had security concerns that the Soviet Union was breaching by putting missiles in Cuba. But the moment that this turns around, they're like, Russia doesn't get security concerns.
Right.
It's astonishing. And it's like Ukraine, for all of this talk about we're standing beside Ukraine. Ukraine is a dying country. You've had millions of people flee, for one. And then you have, 25% of this territory that are lost. And every day they lose more territory and faster because the military is getting destroyed. And they're like, we're standing beside Ukraine. How? How's this beneficial? And one last point, I'm sorry, Istanbul agreements. So you have the Minsk agreements that they blew off, meaning international agreements that were signed by all of these other vassal states, and they just blew them off and pretended like they didn't exist. And then you had the Istanbul agreements where there was a deal, a framework that was set up that Zelensky agreed to, that Boris Johnson comes parachuting in. So you're not going to get security guarantees from us if you sign that deal, which basically scrubs the deal. Look at that. And when Natalie Bennett pointed out in this, even people in Ukraine themselves have pointed this out, that they had a deal. And so, 2 years later, 3 years later, 500,000 dead Ukrainians, 100,000 dead Russians later. And it's like, okay, what was this for? That's, when this first started, I come back to them. At the end of this, they're going to ask, what was this for?
Yes.
Like, you didn't get anything out of it. You lost all of these people. You lost all of this territory. For what? Just because the West wanted to expand onto the border of Russia? It's like this. It is outlandish. It is evil at its core. And yeah, they use all of these myths in order to kind of justify it. And you're right. Trump is going to come in and say, this is not my war. This is not my war.
Let me ask you this, since we're talking about the last week.
Yeah.
Get your thoughts on this. One of the interesting things is, Trump has already said, I read this thing where somebody said to Trump, are you negotiating? He said, no, that would be illegal. Trump understands that they'll yell at him for anything they can. And there's some act, I forget, you probably might remember the name of it, some act that says you can't negotiate if you're a citizen on foreign policy, right? The Wheat something act or whatever. But at any rate, so Trump says, no, I wouldn't do that. Now, Trump talks to Orban. Orban talks to his buddy Fico. Fico ends up in Moscow. We know how that works. Hey, I can't talk to Joe Blow, but if you were to talk to him, Jamarl, and you were to happen to have a conversation with him, he might be interested in the following, right? Nothing illegal about that. I didn't ask you to tell him, or I just tell you, if it gets out, it gets out, right? Here's what's interesting. Meanwhile, Fico talks to Zelensky, and Zelensky offers him $500 million.
I
know. Did you read that? He tries to bribe him. Zelensky's like, I offered him $500 million to go along with us. And Fico's like, get out of here. What do you think I am? A Ukrainian oligarch? And then Zelensky admits it. So I'm like, now, Trump is supposed to be the crook. Trump, all he's trying to do is make money with Trump. Well, all I'll say is this, at least Trump's honest. At least Trump's like, hey, we got some guys from Turkey coming here. Hey, guys, stay at the Trump Hotel. And the guys from Turkey are like, sure, what the hell? You know what? It's right in front of our face. We know at least he ain't like slipping it behind it. Everybody knows who Trump is. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, Trump owns the hotel. Trump go get a piece of that. That's expected, right? But these guys, he ain't off getting $500 million. And you look at it and you're like, $500 million. And he said it was from Russia's EU money that had been taken from Russia, right? Which means he's not doesn't that mean that he's not in control of that money? So that means that he's speaking for somebody else, doesn't it? That means that the people at EU said, tell Fico we'll give him $500 million out of Russians' money if he keeps his mouth shut. Okay.
By the way, it was Ukrainians that tried to kill Fico. If you remember, Fico fully believes that his position on Ukraine was the reason that they tried to take his life.
Oh, yeah.
And the guy who tried to murder Trump, if you remember, that guy had been in Ukraine and was doing like all of this Ukraine work, trying to get the war going. He hated Trump's position on the war, and just so happened, ended up on the roof trying to put a bullet in Trump. So,
Oh, no, that was the guy that ended up on the fifth hole of the Mar-a-Lago. The guy on the roof was a 22-year-old.
Oh, you're right. You're right.
He ended
You're
up
still
at the
right.
fifth hole waiting to pump Trump full of rounds on the golf
Right,
course.
full around. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the guy was in Ukraine though. He was in Ukraine for a long time, and so it's like, Ukraine is not an issue with terrorism. I mean, look at what they've been doing in Russia. What it's Angela Duglia. She has a different pronunciation on her name than her dad because she's a woman, but Dugina, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
His daughter was killed, but it wasn't just her; it was several people that were killed. I mean, they just killed the general Krylov.
Terrorism act, regularly.
Yeah, they have no issue.
The Crocus City Hall where they killed all of those people.
120 something people. They have no issue with terrorism, so it wouldn't be shocked. It wouldn't shock me at all. So it's like the guy who tried to whack him, or at the very least from the organization that tried to whack him, is now trying to bribe him. Yeah, that wasn't going to go down well. That wasn't,
what it sounds like. I used to teach organized crime, and in the Latino gangs in South America and Mexico, they have a term. It's in Spanish, of course, but what it means is the silver or the lead. In other words, when we offer you the silver, a bribe, if you don't take the silver,
you get the lead.
You get the lead. Okay, and it sounds like that's the way they. Although what's weird is they led with the lead. They started off trying to shoot him. Darn, we shot him 5 times. He didn't make it. All right, tell you what. Fair enough. You survived that. Here's $500 million. And the other thing is this: what's going on there? They know Trump's trying to get a deal. And what's interesting is watching the Europeans right now. They're like all over the place. Oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop Trump from? Can we send troops? Let's do some more terrorist attacks. How about firing more rounds at the Crimean Bridge?
They're freaking out. I mean, because think about it. I would say this. It's very possible that Europe is being deindustrialized as a direct result of this war. And I heard this French, I don't know who he was, but he was going down. He was like, we're paying 5 times more for energy. That energy is coming from the US. We're buying all of these weapons. I think he said like 75% of the weapons came from the US, meaning all of this money that Europe is pulling away and dumping into energy is coming to the U.S. in one form or the other, effectively putting money out of Europe. And then because of the energy costs, many of those companies are leaving Europe and coming into the United States. They even have programs to beef up entrepreneurship in Europe for the United States. And he was pointing out, he was like, we're losing all of this money and resources for what? And then you get Trump in, and Trump comes in and says, I'm now going to end the war. Thank you very much. So it's like you did all of that, and you still he killed it. Now, it's one thing if they thought, well, we're going to knock over the Russian government, and we're going to be able to steal the resources from Russia, in which case we can replenish ourselves from that after we balkanize Russia. Okay, that's one thing, but that didn't happen. That decisively didn't happen. The German government has collapsed. The French government has collapsed. What's his name? Starmer is hated. He's deeply, deeply despised as a leader. And so you may get a situation where the ADP wins that election.
Nigel Farage is showing back up on the in the
That's right.
And you know what? If Nigel Farage runs, he'll probably win.
He may win. I mean, people don't realize how hated these politicians and these political parties are. And it's not that people love this kind of right-wing shift. It's just the right wing is the only device that allows those people an option. Yeah. So it's like, okay, in Germany, now I'm paying more for energy. I'm paying more for gas. I have more immigrants coming into the country. I have, you think of all of these ills that are now part of it. And you're like, I'm blaming the government for this. I don't want this war. I'm sick of this war. We're spending all of this money for what? The gas that we used to get for cheap. Okay, that's no longer part of the mix. And now we have to pay all of this money. And you have to justify that somehow. And you try to justify by saying, well, Putin's a bad man. Putin's going to take over all of Europe. But at a certain point, you're like, okay, I don't believe that. Now, I get to the point, from my point of view, these governments have gotten to the point saying, whether we believe it or not, we're sick of this war. And when I was over there covering the elections in Europe, I kept saying, I was like, it's going to be a rightward shift. It was clear as day. When you were talking to people on the ground, it was very clear. We're sick of the way things are. We don't like the way things are. Things are costing more. Inflation is going up. We have all of these immigrants. Like, it was this constant refrain that kept coming up over and over again. And every so often when you talk to a liberal, they say, oh, those people are just racist. Those people are just ignorant. And it's like, okay, you guys are in a bubble. You're in a damn bubble. No, man, it's fascinating. Like,
you know what? Don't you think? Can't you also compare this? Like, I before the election, I kept saying Trump's going to win. Trump's going to win. Why? And I always like this. I'm not the person to read all of the tea leaves, right? I'm a person to go talk to people on the street. And I don't live far from Baltimore. I got cousins, I got relatives in Baltimore. What's happening? Man, we're voting for Trump.
Really?
Why? I go down the street, I see a brother on the back of his car, Trump sticker. I've never seen such a thing in Baltimore, right? But when I ask them why, they're like, man. And they said this, man, we've been voting for Democrats in this city since the 1960s.
Yep.
And look around. Same crap. It's what you said. People are so tired, and they're looking around saying, is there anybody saying anything different? Not that they even have confidence that the other person's going to change. But it's like, you guys are saying that, what should we do? We're suffering. We should keep doing the same. We should double down on the things that, they want out of the war. They want cheap energy. You know what's funny, though? And this is Trump. Have you heard what Trump has said? Yes, we've got he said, Europe's got to pay more. They've got to go up to 5% GDP for their military spending, and they need to buy more gas and oil. And I'm thinking, you know what Trump's like? It's like, you ever take a rag that's just about out of oil. It has a little teeny bit of moisture, and so you squeeze it harder. That's Trump. This is Europe. Is that rag? And he's like, ooh, there may be a little bit of moisture left in this rag. Squeeze.
You know why he's doing that, though? Because that defense spending is coming back to us. That's why.
He's squeezing up for that last dot. But again, Trump is not going to come to them and say, hey, guys, you got to buy more because the Russians are out to get you. No, he's not. He's just going to say, give me your money. Hands up.
More.
Hands up. Empty your wallet.
Like, you want defense? Okay, pay enough. Pay for the defense. It's like the mob, right? That's a nice building you got. That's a nice little Europe you got there. You want to keep it that way? I mean, yeah, man, it's fascinating to me in the way that they've allowed themselves to be ranked like that. Like, it's astonishing. Like, if you were the US, and then it works on two ways, right? Because in one sense, either they have this thing where it's like, okay, well, we're going to get benefits from NATO expanding and from the oil and everything else. And if there's a war, our thinking is that war is going to be fought on European soil.
Right.
Like, we're safely away. And so in the same way that Ukraine was used as a proxy against Russia, all of Europe will be used as a proxy against Russia, with the United States being further away. Now, Russia has said, look, that's not going to work. You're not safe. You will also get hit. But I strongly suspect that the way we're thinking about it, if anything happens, it happens on Europe.
Yep.
It's
amazing. Like, you know what else? After World War II, the U.S. was in a good position. Why? Russia was bashed to pieces. China was smashed to pieces. And from war with Japan, Japan was nuked. Russia was trying to rebuild. Everybody was smashed except us.
Yep.
So I kind of think that they're like, it'd be kind of nice if we had that happen again. And Europe and Russia beat the hell out of each other, and they got all smashed, maybe China, whoever. And then we'll go back to 1946 and all will be, these people are totally nuts.
That's called the end of the world.
Yes. But I think you've spent a lot of time in Europe.
Yeah. And
to me, I don't see any way for them to turn back. This is going to sound weird in a way. The ruling elite of Europe have been robbing the hell out of a lot of countries for a lot of centuries. I'm just saying, the arc of the universe,
but it bends towards justice.
You know what I'm saying? So now, the very same country, the U.S. that helped them rob and steal and do all this kind of stuff.
Now we're colonizing them.
And they went along with it. When the U.S. said, oh, we're going to sanction Maduro and Venezuela, they're like, yes, let's do it. How about Syria? Oh, my gosh, yeah. Africa. A lot of Americans don't know this. For all of the talk that the Democrats have about how they love Black people, the continent with the countries that have the most amount of countries that are sanctioned by the United States, of course, is Africa, right?
Yeah.
So Europe went along with all this stuff, and now their buddy, their friend, their ally is doing the exact same thing to Europe that it did to all these other countries. It just goes to show it never was about race. It was always about money. The Russians aren't black. They want to do the same thing to Russia that they did to the African country, overthrow their government, steal all their resources. The Europeans don't have resources, but they have a market. So they want to take over their market and sell them everything at exorbitant prices. They're just a pretty nasty bunch running
It's just
this
class.
country.
Yeah. It's how do I maximize my profit? It's that. I mean, if you think of South America, for example, when we were, knocking over those governments because those governments wanted to be this kind of more democratic. And they sent, the US goes in, you have the CIA bombing the Chilean capital at one point. What is it, Allende? I mean, but they went through like Chile, Honduras, Bolivia, etc. I mean,
mining the harbors in Nicaragua.
What was it? For the bananas. It'll come to me in a moment. But yeah, they were sending the Contras to kill the Sandinista governments. Like we're like literally paying for kill squads.
Yeah.
And those governments just wanted democracy. Like it's just like, but again, we want those resources. A dictator helps us get our hand on those resources because you're only working with one individual. It's easier to deal with. United Fruit, that was the name of it.
Yep.
We have done this for a while. And I think Europe is just shocked that they are now also dealing with it, but they keep going in the direction. They have sold their people out like nobody's business. And those governments, as they collapse, maybe they do something else. I mean, the reality of it is many of the right-wing governments don't want to be in NATO. Like the AfD may not want to be in NATO. I mean, I don't know how they're going to pull themselves out of it, but they were a very, I would say, skeptical party on that particular party. And if you look at France, look at everything that they had to do to keep what's her name out? Her party. Le Pen. I can't think of the name of her party right now.
Is it the National Front or something?
National Front. That's it. National Front. Yeah. Look at everything they did to keep them out. I mean, they won the first round. And then in the second round, the parties were horse trading in order to get enough votes to keep them out of government. It's like, but think of all the work they had to do to keep them out of government. That's what I'm saying. It's the people in Europe, they clearly want something different. Just like the people in America clearly want something different. The catch becomes, do you have a political process that would allow those people to achieve what they want? Meaning, how can my ideas and aspirations of a public be espoused in this kind of governmental setting where policy reflects the will of the public? Because that's not the way it works today. And it's chaos. It's anger. It's people being pissed off and countries dragging their citizens to war when the citizens don't want the war. I mean, the majority of Ukrainians at this point in the last Gallup poll wanted the war to stop. Even if they had to give up land, stop.
Yes.
We're done. And yet you get Starmer coming out saying, hey, if they're going to use nuclear weapons against us, are you okay with that? We're going to stand by Ukraine. It's like the Ukraine doesn't even want to stand by Ukraine. You're talking about we're going to take a nuclear shot in order to stand by Ukraine. Like these people have lost their minds.
Well, isn't it also kind of, it's interesting because what would they do? Why did like Burkina Faso have to overthrow the government? Why? Because the US and France, they put some puppet in charge and they wouldn't have democracy and he'd screw over the people and the people would suffer as a result of having a puppet leader, right?
Yep,
that's right. The same thing. And the people eventually were able to rise up and get somebody they wanted and overthrow. Okay, you have the exact same dynamic in Europe as they've been doing in the so-called third world, developing world, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They've got these ruling elite. The people of Germany want to work. They want to build Volkswagens. They want to build BASF chemicals, whatever. They're trying to eat, right? And you've got a puppet for the U.S., the one-eyed pirate Schultz. Like, oh, no, don't worry about it. Nord Stream, it was probably a bunch of guys on a sailboat or something.
Oh, he got cut so bad, yeah.
Yeah, some fishermen caught it with a fish hook while they were fishing for bass or whatever.
Right.
Anything, who knows? But let's just keep doing what the U.S. wants and everything will work out fine. Isn't it interesting? It's the same colonialism of putting a puppet in power and taking the people, making the people suffer, that they've been, I mean, the same exact pattern they've done all over the world. And now, realistically, I mean, if you look at the German government trying to outlaw the AfD, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yep.
the same kind of fascism that we put in other countries. You put some guy in, he outlaws all the other parties, and hey, we got it made. They're doing the same kind of fascism. Now it's Europe's turn.
It's Europe, right? I mean, because think about it for the moment. Liberals have gotten this weird thing where, for all of the talk about Donald Trump not taking the elections, liberals don't either. I mean, like, if you look at Romania, they literally canceled the election. The man was going to win the election, and they were like, this guy came out of nowhere. Clearly, the Russians had to do it. And you find out it was their own liberal party in that country that was basically funding it. That just so happened to people.
For those who don't know, tell them that little story. For people who don't know, they got to hear this one. They got to hear this one.
Romania was having their elections, and one of the guys that came out of the blue, Carl Georgescu, just randomly out the blue, and he started gaining a lot of political capital. People started seeing him, paying attention to him, and everything else. First round comes in, he wins, and they freak out because the guy they call him pro-Russian. He's just pro-Romanian. He's a nationalist, right? I just want the best interest for Romania. If that means not being in a war, then that means not being in a war. It's very logical, makes all the sense in the world. He wins the first round. Second round comes in, and while they're doing votes for the second round, the courts kill the election. And they say, well, there was strange activity on TikTok. That's why we did it. We think the Russians were involved in TikTok. Come to find out, it was what it's called, LPL party. It was one of the liberal parties that had given money for election, basically to boost the election. And just so happened, they were giving it to influencers, they were giving it to websites and all of this stuff. And what they weren't telling you to vote for any particular candidate. They would just say, vote for the person who you think is best for Romania. It was something to that effect. And they chose him. And so the courts literally killed an election of the guy that was going to win under this notion of Russian interference. Now, when this first happened, I said, this is nonsense. This is utter nonsense. We've lived through this in the United States. I've seen this with my own eyes. That is nonsense. And came out after the investigation. I was right. It was indeed nonsense. And by the way, it's not just Romania, Georgia, where they're trying to literally overthrow the government of Georgia because they don't like the fact that the prime minister, and for that matter, the other party that won, the president that won, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, that they were, again, nationalists. We're sick of the EU overbearingness. When they tried to pass their fair law, Europe and the US freaked out because they were trying to pass a fair law. And that's the interesting one. That's why I started paying attention to it. Because I'm like, wait a minute. Why are you freaking out over this law? The fair law, we have a fair law. The law just says we need to know who's putting money into the politics of our people. Basically, we need to know who's investing money into the political campaigns and political groups, because you don't necessarily want somebody dropping $100 million and change a political election because of the money. The US freaked out, Europe freaked out. And obviously the reason they were freaking out because, hey, we want to dump a bunch of money in to get you out of office. The election comes up, prime minister wins, Georgian Green Party wins, so does the prime minister, the president wins. French-born, well, I call her a spook, but French-born president of Georgia, Salome, was it Zorbasvili, freaks out, works with Europe to have protests after protests after protests, a third of which of those people weren't even Georgian. They were from other parts of Europe. And they would have these protests every night over and over and over again, trying to create a second Ukraine situation where they have like a Maidan 2.0. And the Georgian government says flat out, we are not going to allow another Maidan.
Yeah, in those words. And they use those words.
Yeah, and they would not tolerate it. They had oceans of policemen preventing that from taking place. And then Europe tried to pass sanctions because, the protesters were holding lilies. They were holding lilies, and they had their guns and their boots on their throats. And it's like, no, they weren't holding lilies. They were using guns and cannons and all this other stuff, going Molotov
fireworks all over the place.
So it's like, get the hell out of here with that nonsense. But that's what they did for Ukraine, right? These were just peaceful Nazis. That's all they were. And it's like, well, no, they weren't. They were violent protests. They were trying to overthrow the government. Orban and
Pizza.
What is his name? Slovakian one. Fico.
Fico. Yeah.
Obama and Fico prevents the sanctions. They're like, look, you're not doing that. We're not doing that again. The U.S. passes sanctions on the Georgia government for it, but the Georgia government is like, we are not going to allow Maidan 2.0. Full stop. And so Shalom Zobrasvili, who proclaimed, I'm not leaving. Well, she lost the election. She's on her way out. And she even threatened the government recently saying, you better have new elections. Europe has gotten to this point that they believe that every time they lose an election, they keep running elections until they get the person that they want, as opposed to having a national government with a certain level of sovereignty that makes that choice on their own. What they want is a second front on Russia.
Yep.
That's what they want.
And it's not happening. So let me ask you this. Let me throw this at you. Because Galloway hit me with this question the other day. It's pretty clear Trump wants a deal. It's pretty clear that there are powerful elements in the U.S. and in the EU that want to stop him. I mean, that's a whole show there.
Yeah.
In your opinion, within the first, at first he said, I want to deal within 24 hours. And now he literally said the other week, I'm going to end the conflicts in the Middle East. He said this, not saying whether it's true or false, but he said, I'm going to end the conflict in the Middle East and in Ukraine. And then he said, and Ukraine's going to be tougher, which I agree with him, right? So let me throw this to you. Does Trump get a deal in Ukraine?
Trump gets a deal in Ukraine if he's willing to give Putin everything he wants.
Well,
But I gotta be honest, I don't even know what that looks like. Because Russia is not going to allow another Minsk agreement. Like, they're under no circumstances are they going to allow Ukraine to freeze the conflict, build up weapons, and then attack again a few years later. I mean, look at what happened in Syria.
I think there's if we name the elements, right?
Mm-hmm.
No Ukraine in NATO, which might I add, that also means no NATO in Ukraine.
That's right.
That's the game they tried to play before. Okay, so number one, no Ukraine in NATO. Ukraine neutrality, we'll call it that. No troops, no other troops, none of that crap, right? Neutrality. Number two, what's the other?
Respect for the Russian language.
Respect for the Russian language and the Russian rights for the Russian people that are in
the
left.
An acknowledgement of Zaporozhia,
of the new territories.
Right, Donetsk.
Right.
So there was one more that I'm missing. Oh, Crimea, of course.
Right.
Recognition of those. I think there might have been one.
Those are the main.
Yeah, those are the main points.
If somebody else can think of something else, put it in the chat. But it's the new territories. To me, the first two, neutrality for Ukraine. There ain't no way to get there without that, right?
Yep. That's non-negotiable.
Recognition of the territories, non-negotiable. And rights for the people there, which is why they went in the first place. So those three things, if somebody else can think, denazification, exactly. I would argue Trump's got to do denazification if he's going to get a deal with the Ukrainians. But at any rate, so
they're going to put a bullet in Zelensky. Yeah,
those are those elements. You think they can get it? You think he can get them?
I think they can get it. I mean, because again, this is not Trump's war, and Ukraine at one point was neutral. They just started messing around with it. If you remember when they gave the speech in 2008, where they were like, "Yeah, we're going to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO," and at that point, all hell broke loose.
Yeah, like hell you are.
Yeah, you got William Burns writing a memo, and net means net. And by the way, this was something that even Yeltsin was against.
Yeah,
like this notion of expanding NATO. This stuff was always a red line. They knew it to be a red line. That's why they put the thing in. I won't move an inch to the east, because they understood the expansion of NATO is a threat to Russia because it's a military organization, regardless of them saying, we're just holding flowers and we're purely defensive. It's like, okay, get the hell out of here. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that nonsense. No, Trump can get a deal. But the sticking point is how do you ensure that it's an honest deal? Because if you think of all the missile treaties that the U.S. has just blown off, if you think of the JCPOA, they just blew it off. If you think of Minsk agreements, they just blew it off. So even if you make a deal, how do you ensure that the deal is legit? How do you ensure that the deal doesn't go away when the next president comes in the office? I mean, even the one China policy, they're effectively blowing that off as we speak. So, the issue is trust. I mean, either Russia is going to be in a situation though where they have to take all of Ukraine, which I would imagine they don't want because you don't want guerrilla wars and all that. Or
Western
you find some
Ukraine.
kind of way to have a deal where you can ensure that both sides of the deal are sticking to it. And that might be this notion of security guarantees from Russia and Ukraine. Like basically where Russia and Western powers have some level of security guarantee for the security and the safety of Ukraine. I don't know how they do that though.
I got an idea.
Please.
Troops from another country. Like
What country?
China,
Oh.
like African troops, like some, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That I'll bet you
peacekeepers.
this, and I'll bet you this. If you think about it, if you are, and Lavrov's a brilliant guy. Lavrov
Yes,
is nobody's fool, right?
Mhm.
Right now, if you are the Russians, if you're Lavrov's people, haven't you been having meetings for the last 2 years saying, if we get a deal eventually, how do we ensure, right? So
Yep.
I will guarantee you that if you were in charge right now, you'd say, I'm going to put a unit of people, and your whole job, like, a dozen academics and former diplomats and all these people, you guys, you get a whole wing of the State Department or whatever, foreign ministry, and your job is to come up with a way that we can ensure any deal that we have as best we can. That's the only thing because you're right, you're right. Hey, you know what? I've always said this about narcissists. It's easy to get a deal with a narcissist. There's nobody in the world that'll give you a quicker deal because they have no intention of keeping their word.
Right.
So if you got no intention to keep, what do you want, Garland? $1 million? You got it.
Yeah,
Your
you
firstborn
promise
male
anyway.
son, got second two. Whatever the hell. I don't, right? So
Yeah.
it's easy for them to get a deal with the US because they never keep their word. The question becomes how. And I think they're really smart people. And I think, and think about this. If the US says, well, sure, we want troops, and US says, well, can it be China? And they say, fair enough, African troops. A bunch of African troops. What's the matter? You don't like the Africans? I thought you wanted the Africans to be a part of everything. We'll run it through the UN. We'll bring African troops in from various African countries, and they'll be there. I don't know if this works.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think that Russia has to look at the only thing that matters is how they keep a deal.
How do you keep it? It's that part. It's that part because it's impossible to trust the U.S. at this point. It's impossible. I mean, think of all the missile treaties that were worked out back during like the 80s, the 90s, etc. And then, Putin kind of made this point about the Oreshnik. He was like, look, if you would have stuck to the treaty, this missile wouldn't be created. Like, we did this for strategic reasons. The moment you got rid of the treaty, this was fair game. I think what's wild to me, though, did you see China come out with their 6th generation fighter craft?
Their what? 6th generation what?
6th generation fighter jet.
Is that the one that can go up into space?
Man, yes. Yes. Like, you see stuff like that, you're like, holy shit, how long have we been doing the F-35? And you look at that thing, and the thing is going into space. And then, like, the fact that the Russians have the technical know-how to create something like the Oreshnik by itself is astonishing. Like, that thing has such, like, devastating force. Like, the amount of force and devastation that thing can put out is hard to comprehend. I mean, the thing breaks into 6, then breaks into 12. I mean, it's more that all of them have
It's
nuclear.
like 36 missiles or something, and all that, like 6 pods of 6 hypersonic missiles, and they go so fast that they get up to like 4,000 degrees or something, and they hit with this unbelievable kinetic energy that's so powerful that even if they don't have explosives, they destroy everything.
Astonishing. It's
with
just
like the heat, like turns everything. The heat is so hot, it like turns everything to dust, like breaks things into its basic elements.
It's astonishing.
You don't need it. You can, it changes the dynamics of conventional war because now I can have the power of a nuclear attack, but I don't have to go nuke. So in other words, we're beginning to be a generation behind our it's no longer peer anymore. Anyway, we only got a couple more minutes left, so we're running out of time. But I did want to ask you, Syria. So the Erdogan et al. Overthrows is Syria. Now,
pretty much, yes. I'm glad you said Erdogan because he tried to be like, I don't have anything to do with this. I don't have anything to do with this.
But immediately, the immediate reaction is, Putin screwed. The actors of resistance, everybody screwed. The Israelis won. I looked at it and I'm like, man, you got a country full of ISIS crazy people They're
Yeah.
going to be fighting each other that you take ownership of. Now Erdogan hates the Kurds. Now they got this. They got some guy apparently who's able to exist for 4 days with no water and can stay in a cell for 3 months at a time and doesn't even need a shave and looks like he's gained weight. I mean, it's a strange country. What the hell's going on there, Jamarl?
Oh, too funny. Yeah, the guy.
How about that one? How about the Pulitzer Award?
Yeah, the CNN guy. You know, that's wild to me, right? Like, you would think. And then, did you see what Jake Tapper brought on? So Jake Tapper brought her on because, you know, it was so humiliating, right? That CNN had to deal with the fallout of everybody saying, you guys just faked the video. And she's like, yeah, we've been doing additional investigations and we found out that he had a different name and everything else. It's like, you guys got fact checked. That's all.
Yeah.
Call it what it is. Yeah. Call it what it
You
is.
did-
No,
you did
serious
something.
screw, man. That is going to crack.
You know what it reminds me of? I tell you what it reminds me of, the Steele dossier.
Yes.
As soon as you look at it,
Yes.
you're like, well, wait a minute. So according to the Steele dossier, the Russians are running money out of their consulate in Miami, except there is no Russian consulate in Miami.
Right.
So the FBI couldn't look at the Steele dossier and start going down and say, oh, that's bullshit.
Right.
Get out of here. You or I. Immediately we're like, yeah, that's a Apollo worship. Get out of here with that. Consulates in right?
Wow.
And they're supposed to be specialists. So no, the FBI is not inept bunglers. It was like, whatever, let's use this thing. It was a tool.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe
Yeah.
that anybody could look at this guy. First of all, let me say this. Do you have any idea what this man would smell like? You ever been around a homeless person? You know, like I remember one time, like the first time I really dealt with it bad, I was in LA and I got on a bus and there was a homeless guy in and I got off at the next stop. You know what I mean?
Oh,
the
that's
smell
Yeah.
was just like made your eyes water. I'm like, I'm getting off and I will get on the next bus.
That guy looked like he had a cologne.
Can you imagine what a guy who hadn't bathed in 3 months, who hadn't had food and water in 4 days? First of all, he'd be dead, so he'd be decomposing, so that wouldn't smell so good. But even then, you look at the guy, his clothes are clean, his hair is nice, look like he could stand to lose. It looked like he could lose. Actually, if you look at him, he's a little plump. He could stand a couple days without food in a cell.
Yep.
Wouldn't hurt him, you know. But my point is, we're supposed to believe that the FBI can't figure out that there is no Russian consulate in Miami and that she can't figure out that a guy who just looked like he just stepped out of the shower hasn't been laying in a cell for 4 months. And now it's like they fooled us. No,
Well,
and you ain't gonna fool us.
Yeah. Well, you know, Clarissa Ward said once before that I think it was some article where she pointed out that she was like radicalized in Syria, where she was like angry at the Obama administration because they didn't overthrow the government and all this stuff. And she was like, you know, yeah, I was supposed to be a reporter there, but, you know, I had my point of view. I'm not saying they should overthrow the government, but they should overthrow the government. It was that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, so you have motivated reporting. Your reporting is going in a very specific direction. You don't necessarily care about what's true. You just have an idea of what you want. That Syria is going to collapse. I mean, they have been killing Alawites. They've been doing assassinations. They've been killing people in the streets. This kind of ethnic cleansing that has been taking place, even though they have Jelani as the being, you know, they get a guy from ISIS who they gave a shave, took his turban off, and they put him in a suit. They even tried to change his name. At this point.
Yeah.
I mean, but the fundamental problem is that you have all of these groups. All of these groups have guns. Many of these groups are just brutally fascistic under the context of their religious beliefs. And they're taking it out on the population in the way that you expected them to take it out on the population. And so now you have Christians, Shia, Sunni. You have all these people who have lived under a tolerant government for like 50 years, if not more. And now all of a sudden, okay, now you have one God. Could you imagine that? Like if somebody came to your state and out of the blue, just overnight, you have one God. And that God is Allah. And you guys got to worship him in the very specific way that you said worship him. In Syria used to have people on the beaches in bikinis, like two-piece bikinis, man, walking around with no shirts on. And now they have been put into the situation where they're under this kind of fascist religious rule. and they are calling it a democracy. It's astonishing, like the way that they're carrying around saying like this is a good thing. If anybody thinks this is a good thing, I can give you a list of videos and pictures to show that it's not.
Well, let me add this. Don't you
disgusting.
think this? Okay, normally people are, when they put some ISIS madman in charge of a country, the people all cower in fear, right?
Right.
These people ain't cowering in fear.
They're not.
in the streets and they're angry. And
Yeah.
I suspect at some point that, let's just say I were Iran or maybe even Russia, I'd see all those people in the street and I'd say, hey guys,
Here's a gun.
if some resistance was to happen to arise against the Western backed government and you needed a gun, I'm just saying, if you looked over there, there's a pallet of bricks.
Right.
That, right. But
I'm not saying I'm giving you a gun, but if you need a gun, here's a gun.
There's a pallet of bricks, and behind that pallet of bricks, there might be a couple warehouse loads of guns. See what I'm saying? So now, if you're the Iranian, if you're whoever, if you're the resistance forces, it's a nice little setup for you.
Yeah.
Now you can really give them hell. Because
Yeah.
why? Because it is an actual resistance.
Yep.
The
It's so
Alawites, the Druze, all of these people, they're going to literally say, they're going to cut our heads off. Yeah, they're going to cut your heads off. Yeah.
and they have
Here's a
to.
gun. Here's a machine gun. They're going to kill your kids. Yes, they are. There you go. Arm them. Now, guess what? Now you have a legitimate resistance. I think there's going to be a nasty resistance in there, and they're going to be attacking anything that looks like Turks or whatever the case. But first of all, the Turks are going to be fighting it out with the Kurds, who are Americans back. They got a mess on their hands, a disaster on their hands, and it ain't. They've been bragging for a little while and walking around with their chest out. Man, I think they're going to be real sorry.
Erdogan believes that he can maintain this somehow. I mean, he's, because if you notice, he's come out saying we need to get rid of the sanctions, we need to give them relief, we need to build the airports, we need to build the roads. It's like, okay, so why is he saying this? Because he knows that if Syria remains in the exact same condition that it was forced on our side, meaning because the sanctions and everything else that we put on the side, and on top of that, stealing the oil and the wheat, basically damaging the country to prevent the country from ever being able to rebuild, because they couldn't necessarily take it over the first time that they were trying to overthrow it, terrorize it. And so he's like, we got to get rid of all this stuff. We need to fix the country. We got to fix it now. Because he's now trying to fix the country that he was instrumental in helping to break in the first place, because he wants to be able to effectively steal the country. Now, whether that works, I mean, the biggest problem is the fact that these guys are fascists. And you're putting fascists in a country, like, for whatever you thought of Assad, meaning whatever you think of Assad, he was tolerant with the various religious groups. And so you have a country that under no circumstances is used to being under this one God stuff. So, you have a fascist government with people who have no experience of being under a fascist government in this context. And so, those people, how many head chops is it going to take for the Alawites to get pissed off and, like you say, hey, where's the barrel of bricks? Or, how many for the Christians where they're burning Christmas trees and beating the hell out of Christians in the street? How many does it take for them to say, hey, where are the barrel of bricks? I agree with you. And the ironic part is a resistance under that model may actually end up with somewhat of a democratic government.
Yes.
Which is ironic.
Wouldn't it be ironic that they created the dynamics for a true resistance? Let me add this. Here's another problem. So the U.S. is occupying the area where they grow the wheat, and occupying the area where the oil and gas, so we can, of course, steal it, as we always do, pilfer and loot the country. Well, guess what? The people are going to say, hey, we want roads and schools. There's only one way. See, as long as Assad was in, they could steal all of this stuff and just say, oh, Assad's terrible, right?
Yeah.
Well, now the people are going to say, hey, can we have our oil or wheat or some funds from that? And the U.S. is going to be like, nah, we're just going to keep occupying that area and steal it. To the victor goes the spoils. Because the issue, see what I mean? That's the problem. Go ahead.
Well, the issue that the U.S. has are the Turks. If you notice, Erdogan has just said, we will bury you. He said, either you give up your guns or we will bury all of you. You will die in Syria. That's what he's come out to recently, right? So you effectively have the jihadists who've taken over, who have been killing the Turks and taking the territory of the Kurds. So they have been in wars constantly, even after all of this stuff where it currently stopped. They were still going after Kurdish groups and taking more and more territory. The Kurdish groups had begged Israel for help because they were like, hey, you're the strongest people here. Please give us help. Israel didn't necessarily want to do it because they don't want to piss off the Turks. And the U.S. is in a position where they sent Blinken over, who's the most ineffective, worthless sociopath that we ever had in Congress, or, even worse is Matt Miller. But he goes over there, says, hey, we have a deal, and the deal falls apart almost immediately with those jihadist groups effectively taking more and more territory from the Kurds. So from their point of view, we want a whole Syria. So you're going to get this situation where the Turks and the jihadists are going to be working against the Kurds to take over all of Syria because, as Erdogan knows, well, we need the wheat and we need the oil because those things are the things that require Syria to function in the way that Syria functions. They're going to take it. So regardless of this kind of uprising that may take place, the jihadists and the Turks themselves may end this kind of this patch of land that the Americans and the Kurds have settled on. Also, Trump is an X factor because Trump has said he's going to pull the troops out of Syria.
Yeah.
So
who knows what he's going to do?
Yeah.
He wants out of Syria and Iraq.
He does. Well, he definitely wants out of Syria. I mean, he has said it once before. If you remember, Trump was the one that pulled out and stole the oil. Where he's like, look, why are we there? I don't see the point of us being there. I'm pulling out. And he said, but I'm stealing the oil. I'm taking the oil. I'm stealing the oil. And so this time around, he may just pull them out entirely.
How about this? One last thing, since one area of the world that we didn't cover, and I got to throw this one at you.
Mm-hmm.
So South Korea.
So man.
The South Korean president comes out and says, all right, I am a military dictator. Well, the parliament comes out, they fight back, and they stop him right. Now, here's what happened. So Jake, another sociopath, Sullivan, is doing an interview. And here's what the guy asked him about the, I did a statement analysis that I sent analysis on it, right? So the guy's asking him about the South Korea coup attempt, right? And the guy says this, did you see that coming? Here's what he says. I cannot say that I saw the declaration of martial law. Always be wary when somebody starts off saying, I cannot say. We didn't ask you what you can't say. We asked you what you could, right?
I can't admit to it.
I cannot say that I saw the declaration of martial law coming and then have it reversed 24 hours later. So but now think about that. Think about that.
That statement doesn't say anything.
He
Like
says,
that statement
I can't say that I saw it coming and then get it reversed. So when you add that, it negates the first part. It's like
the first part negates the first part.
Investigations and statement analysis. And I put an example. A guy says the investigator says to a suspect that so the guy suspected of killing his wife. And the guy says, did you know that your wife was coming home at 7 p.m.? So this is what the investigator says, right? And the guy says, I did not know that she was driving her mother's car home at 7 p.m.
Right. Right.
So you put a caveat in there. So you could very well know that she was coming home at 7 p.m., but you can say no.
Right.
Why? Because at some point you may find out that I did know. And then I could say, no. What I said was I didn't know she was driving her mother's car. Of course I knew she was coming home at 7 p.m. I had no idea she was going to be driving her mother's car. So he says, did you know that they were going to try to overthrow the damn government? And I didn't know that they were going to do that and it was going to get overturned within 24 hours. In other words, if he was honest, he'd say, well, we planned it, but damn it, they overturned it in 24 hours. Sons of bitches. Jesus.
But the first statement was non-committal. I can't say that I knew that.
Right. If you think about it, that's telling, isn't it? Why can't you say that? Well, because they go to jail, because it would be illegal, of course.
Yeah, he's like, I can't say that I knew that. I can't say I knew that was going to happen. It's like, okay, but did you know it was going to happen though? But I can't say I knew it was going to happen. I can't say. It's weirdly honest and dishonest at the same time. It's like a superposition of honesty and dishonesty. It's super weird. No, I agree with you, man. Like I kept, from my point of view, a lot of this stuff has to do with Trump. And what I mean by that is it's almost like they're trying to Trump-proof the world. Like Donald Trump comes in and says, look, I'm going to stop wars, not start them. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop wars, not start them. Now, is he telling the truth? Who the hell knows? It's Donald Trump, right? He can mean and say some of anything. But what if they believe him? Like, what if they actually earnestly believe what he's saying, or at the very least, that's some kind of fear of what he's saying? Okay, well, when Trump was in, he made deals with North Korea in order to stop them from firing missiles in the Sea of Japan, which shows on some level that, hey, you actually can, reach out to countries and come to deals to stop them from doing that. Okay, but the U.S. didn't like that. And if you remember, they criticized them constantly over the fact that he was willing to do that. Oh, I can't believe American president is willing to meet with this North Korean dictator. It's like, okay, who the hell is he supposed to meet with? It's not. No. It's like, who? Like, what mythical beast or figure do you think he's going to meet with? But they hated it. They hated it. And if they think he's going to come in and do something similar now, okay, maybe we need somebody else in South Korea that we can trust. Maybe it's that, right? And so it's like, from their point of view, you have the South Korean delegation that went to China saying, hey, why are we fighting these guys? Why are we, teeing up against China? Why are we allowing ourselves to be used in this way? And then all of a sudden it's like, I need to declare martial law because we don't believe that, everybody is on board. We think that they're North Korean people who have infiltrated the North.
Yeah, that's right. They forgot about that. They blamed it. He blamed it on the North Koreans.
Yeah,
I had to do it because they were. And then later on, didn't they say he was lonely or something?
But
he was lonely. Okay,
right.
I love that.
When they were doing the investigation, they found out that he was trying to start a war with North Korea. Because if you remember, North Korea started sending garbage and all of this stuff into South Korea, and they kept saying, "Stop fucking with us," basically. "Stop, leave us alone, leave us alone." And what they were saying was because he was dropping flyers in North Korea,
right,
and like flying stuff in North Korea. North Korea looked at that as a provocation,
right.
And so on the other front, it's the belief that the South Korean government won't be, let's say, as obsequious to the United States in regards to Parliament, because Parliament could say, "Well, no, we don't want to fight this."
And he lost Parliament. It makes sense.
He lost
last election. The opposition won in Parliament, so
that's right.
Their guy. But isn't this interesting? He's their guy. Parliament's the opposition. And he tried to eliminate the opposition.
He tried to eliminate it. And by the way,
that Blinken and these guys weren't involved.
Got impeached, and then the leader who came in after him got impeached also. Got impeached this morning or last night.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
just astonishing.
Let me go on with this Blinken. So the guy says, he asked him, right? And then he says, no, I didn't see that coming. Yeah. And then he goes, but we had January 6th. And he goes on and starts talking about Sullivan. After they ask him, did you see it coming? Yeah, right. So the guys interview him. He says, did you see that coup attempt coming in South Korea? He says, no, I didn't see that, and the reverse within 24 hours. Yeah, we had that, but then we had January 6th. Let's not forget him. And he just starts talking about January 6th.
January 6th totally changed. I'm sorry. That was worse than January 6th. Infinitely worse. I mean, because that martial law declaration expelled Parliament, meaning Parliament wasn't supposed to meet. The press wasn't supposed to put anything out that wasn't under the government's control. There wasn't supposed to be public protests, like meaning people getting together. And if you remember that night, you had a situation where the public was literally holding off the military to give Parliament time to vote down the martial law. And you could see them fighting. The people had their cameras. Basically, everything was going to be filmed in the way they were doing it. And the police were trying to break through. You had these old men like running to Parliament to get the Parliament in order to vote that nonsense down.
Women, one blind woman.
Yeah.
One of the Parliament members was blind at like 60, trying to fight her way in there. I mean, you got to give these people heroic. That's
astonishing. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, they fought for their government.
First of all, January 6th wasn't the government.
That's right.
It wasn't the government. Number one. Number two, they weren't armed. Right?
That's right.
And so here you got the government, the president, sending in special forces. Like
Goons.
They had special forces helicopters landing on Parliament building, rappelling on ropes and stuff like that. Apparently, I don't know if you know about this, they had this plan to kidnap leaders of the opposition party, right? Kidnap them. So you're gonna overturn Parliament. You're gonna kidnap members of the opposition party, and then you're gonna start a war with North Korea. That sounds like. That's why I say I ain't 100% convinced that they're going to let Trump ever take power. Because let's face it, if you look at Syria, their handiwork there. If you look at their handiwork in Ukraine, their attempted handiwork in Romania, their attempted handiwork in Georgia, and on in South Korea, I ain't real convinced yet. I'll believe January 20th when I get to it. Until then, you got to be skeptical.
I mean, President J.D. Vance. I suspect J.D. Vance is more of a true believer in that stuff than Trump is.
But either one
I
of
don't
them.
know.
Either
Yeah, I
one
don't
of them.
know.
I ain't convinced what these people. I never thought, usually, every 4 years people say this is the last election, and everybody goes, "Come on with your crazy conspiracy theories, stop there." And then we have another election.
Right.
There is so much. Let me ask you this. Let me know if you got to go. If you got to go now.
Oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
We're fine.
Let me ask you this. Just think of the amount of dirt if they start digging around. And they're like, well, let's just look at the emails of what they might have emailed to, I don't know, Twitter because they didn't like what Garland, Nixon, or what this Jimmy Dore or whoever. Let's see. Let's look at the emails they sent to YouTube. Oh, yeah, we want to take this Mark Sloboda off and this person off. Let's look at all. What? Just think. If they start looking at the documentation, just think if they go into the FBI and they find all of these emails going back and forth. Yeah, we're going to stop Trump. Hey, we got nothing on them. That's okay. It never stopped us. We're going to get them anyway.
It never stopped us
They
before.
start looking at the cables between MI6 to CIA, blah, blah, blah. Who's Joseph Mifsud? Joe, get out of here. We made that name up so we could get Trump. That's a guy that works in the mailroom. Come on. If they start looking at the Joseph Mifsud, the guy doesn't exist. There is no Joseph Mifsud. It's clearly obvious that he was just an operator. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, God forbid somebody starts sniffing around where all the Ukraine money went to. They can't. Can they really?
They might.
Ask Patel? Can they let this
honestly, politically, they should. Like just on the political front.
Yes.
Like, because if Trump goes in and says, you know what, we're going to focus on corruption. That's going to be one of our issues. Oh, man. And they start looking at how the money for Ukraine was spent. They start looking at, like you said, how the FBI operates, whether they were going after certain Americans, whether they were, oh, man. Especially the Ukraine thing. But look, they have given Hunter Biden an 11-year pass. Now, that doesn't stop them from looking into it.
Exactly.
But
how about this?
Impervious.
What if they start looking into communications between Fannie, what's her name, and
Fannie Willis?
Some of them had been in meetings at the White House. What if they look into that and they find that they were having discussions about that stuff? How about how about what's his name, Blinken, and his connection to the 51 intelligence officers? See what I mean? Dude, how many hours would we be here if we went over all of the things that could put these people in jail?
I think they definitely need to look into January 6th. And I think they definitely need to look into, because look, I don't have this belief that the feds, I don't have this belief that the feds set it up, but a lot of people do. And the fact that a lot of people do, and you get questions. Well, you ask them questions and they don't tell you. It's like, how many FBI agents were on the thing? Oh, they want to tell you that. It's like, what do you mean you don't want to tell that? Why is that, why is that top secret? Why is that something you're hiding from the American public? Did any intelligence officials go into the buildings? How about that?
Right. Yeah.
Like, those are questions that you should ask, especially since people are believing that you're egging them on. All of the video footage should be released. Well, stop.
Exactly.
I don't. The Democrats were using this kind of cherry pick thing. I mean, look, from my point of view, January 6th was just outlandish. I mean, these guys were out there fighting cops and putting cops in the emergency room. And so Republicans were coming out saying, oh, this was just a normal day at the park. Okay, get the F out of here. Get out of here. That's not a normal day at the park. You were literally fighting cops. I mean, they wouldn't be making this argument that Nancy Pelosi did this if it was a normal walk in the park. They're saying that Nancy Pelosi didn't call the cops or getting enough military in. So clearly, there was a massive amount of violence that was taking place. The secondary question, though, is, were the feds part of it? Like, meaning, did they let people in? There was a video out where the guy comes in, the feds take him away, they give him a fist bump after they let him loose. And you look at that and say, okay, what the hell is that? Or the guy.
They add this. They open the doors and I see video and they're letting people in. They got video of the cops saying, where's so-and-so's office? Oh, you go down there, make a left. You know what I mean? And I look at that and I'm like, come on. We got some questions that's got to be answered. If you're
That's why they should have had an honest
door,
investigation.
Okay, who opened the doors? Was it a police officer? Was it the person of Fed? Was it did we get something? Did somebody call down from the FBI? Hey, open the door over there on the western side. Yeah, go ahead and let the build. You know what I mean? What do we know? And meanwhile, I'll tell you something else I want to know. There were communications during on. What was Pelosi or different people saying? Who were they calling? What was the FBI saying? Who were they sending? Who was it? You know what I mean? Look, if you believe that it was a complete setup, or if you believe that it wasn't a setup, that it was the worst thing that ever happened, there's an easy way to settle this, isn't it?
Have an honest
Give
investigation.
us all of the information,
Yeah.
put it out there, and let the people look at it, and we can argue based on the information.
Right.
But as long as I'm like, well, how many feds were involved, and what was their job there, and why, what, you know what I mean, and what were the politicians? And I've heard that Pelosi was asked to send 10,000 troops, and she said no. I want to know the truth on that.
Well, she didn't send it because her thinking was that it looked like Donald Trump was trying to overthrow the government. Which,
but my point
on some level, you know.
But my point is, just give us all that information.
Agreed.
We can decide how we feel about it when we know whether or not you turn down troops, whether or not, you know, I don't want some FBI. Literally, I'm watching Congress and they're asking some FBI person, how many people did you have? We can't tell you that. Wrong answer.
Garland. Yep.
Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Give us all of the answers and then we'll make a decision. And
well,
if somebody
come
needs
to find out, there were a lot
time.
of FBI agents there when they released the documentation on it. I mean, no, I agree with you, man. They screwed up. Like, they always run into this issue of what is in the country's best interest versus what is in their own personal interest. It's kind of like during the debates. It's like Trump that, I'm not doing a debate in the primary. It is in my personal best interest not to do a debate in the primary because I'm 40 points up. I can only go down.
Exactly.
Kamala Harris did something similar when she first got in the race. I have no reason to do interviews and stuff like that because I have my glow. I'm coasting right now. I don't need to get involved in that. And so they do that all the time. But this was the same thing for January 6th, where they effectively said, instead of saying people have questions and we're going to get those questions answered in an honest way, kind of like a church committee, they decided, well, we're going to use this as a platform to hit Trump in order to try to ding him up for the election. And it's like, okay, dude, that's not in America's best interest. That's purely what you believe that is in your party's best interest, meaning you're running this purely under the guidelines of a party, as opposed to the nation needs to get questions or answers to what happened on that day, since a lot of people believe that the feds were somehow involved in stoking it on. Yeah, I think that's just honest. I don't get the issue why the honesty part is problematic. Even like opening the videos. Okay, here are all the videos. Don't just give us videos of people fighting. Where are the other videos? Get rid of the questions. I don't, it's something aggravating.
I'm sorry about that, but we can't leave without hitting one more thing. Because whenever people talk about January 6th, I got to bring something else up. Mm-hmm. Luigi. Tell you what.
Yes.
Here's my connection.
This is so morally interesting. Yeah.
Yes, my connection is this. The Democrats ran and they screamed about January 6th. And one of the things they said was they were coming in. They wanted to get us. They wanted to hang us. They wanted to do bad things to members of the ruling.
They wanted to hang Mike Pence.
Yeah. So it was, you have to be, the plebes, you know what I mean? The unwashed, the hoi polloi out there. Right. You have to be upset because we're making the argument, okay, true, false, or indifferent. We're going to make this argument. The argument was a bunch of Trump supporters who are the evil incarnate came in to do evil, bad things to members of the ruling elite, and you have to be upset about it. Okay. Didn't seem to fly. And I think now we know why. Because along came Luigi, and he did a very bad thing to a member of the ruling elite. And people didn't exactly go bananas over that. They were like chest bumping, fist bumping, high fiving. I was surprised at it. I didn't take a moral position because I understand. I didn't think. I put it like this: as soon as it happened, I'm like, everybody said the same thing. Yeah, that's some guy that probably got his, you know what I mean? He probably like his mother or daughter or somebody needed something and they did not. Everybody said somebody got screwed and he wanted some get backs, right? But what's interesting is that wasn't particularly the case with him, as it were. He's very rich, but yet and still, that was the foundation of where he was coming from. Right. And now we understand, now the ruling elite should understand, when you whine to us that somebody's trying to hurt you, the only thing that the masses will do is say, it's a shame they missed. That's
Yeah.
all they're going to say. I mean,
Yeah.
this is reality.
Yeah.
I think they're looking over their shoulders, brother. Peeping
Think
around
about
corners is the guy. What was it? The Ghetto Boys, where he said, "The guy, my mind keeps playing tricks on me," and he
my
says, "I
plan.
keep peeping
Oh,
around,
yeah.
peeping around corners, looking over my shoulders."
Right. Every time my eyes close, I start sweating. Blood start coming from my nose.
Yeah, exactly.
What he
That's
said,
what they're
somebody
doing.
look at me, yo. He said, I don't know what it is, but I'm watching my back. I can see it when I'm deep in the covers. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, think like the Luigi thing is fascinating to me. It's so like, I keep thinking to myself, your society has gotten to the point where they feel so maligned, so taken advantage of, so screwed over that when somebody shoots an elite in the back, that the audience applauds. Like meaning like there's some cases where let's say somebody murdered somebody, right? And the person goes to court, the person is convicted, and the crowd cheers that the person was convicted. It's like, that's right, get that guy. He had no right doing
justice.
They want justice. From their point of view, this is justice. So think about how weird or how tortured your society is, where the result of it is in the same way that a murderer who like raped and killed a kid, where they cheer the fact that that guy gets executed. In this case, the CEO of a healthcare company gets murdered and the audience applauds. That is astonishing. And look, part of it is anybody that has to work with insurance company gets it at a visceral level. It's so aggravating. Like this idea that I want healthcare, but you're denying your entire job. The way you make your money is effectively to deny me of care, of getting that job. And then I got to pay you $1,000 a month on top of that. And then it's like my mom was in a situation where she was trying to get medication. She was trying to get a procedure. And some rando person who is not the doctor is like, yeah, that's okay. We don't want to do that. My grandmother would need something. Yeah, that's okay. We don't want to do that. And after a while, you get angry over that stuff. When you got hundreds of thousands of people who effectively lost their lives as a direct result of them maximizing their profit at the expense of people's health, pain and injury. And that's how they make their profits. It's disgusting. And so anybody that has had to deal with that get this visceral reaction of F that guy.
Yeah,
It's
you know what it is? Yep. It is, you know what's one of the things that I heard immediately, and if I'm honest, I mean, it's a practical, numerical evaluation. Because right off the bat, the people were like, oh, he got killed. And I saw somebody write on online. Yeah, but he's no doubt he's responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands, right? Of people who've died because of, they turned down their medication or wouldn't cover them or whatever, right? And I thought, it's probably the truth.
Yeah.
It isn't a person saying, I'm for killing innocent people, I'm for murder, I'm from summarily executing people. It was a numerical, practical comment. Look, I'm supposed to feel bad for this guy. We all know that he is making tens of millions of dollars a year. And his job, his country, his company is the one that does it the most. His job is to make sure that you give me money and I don't cover you when you need it. That's what he does. You can die, to hell with you. And it's your parents, it's your nephew that has leukemia that's 12, it's your grandmother, it's me, it's you. I got a bad back, whatever the case may be, right? And people just looked at it and said, well, I mean, honestly, I don't feel sorry for him. They just looked at it like, well, I don't feel sorry for him.
That's what you look at it.
He kills people. And so, hey, man,
it just feels crummy. Yeah, it just feels crummy. And it's like, and then you think to yourself, okay, well, is there a political solution? Well, there is no political solution. I mean, the same people who are wagging their fists at people for, not feeling bad about the guy getting shot are the same people that are donating massive amounts of money to ensure that nothing changes on the issue of healthcare. Like if you think of like the corporations, one of the reasons that Obama limited Obamacare apparently was that he didn't want to get into a fight with healthcare companies, like either insurance companies or drug companies, etc. He didn't want to have that fight. And so he's like, yeah, I'm just not going to go that far with Obamacare. So it's like, the solution is a political solution, but there's no way to get that political solution. It's not like one of the political parties espouse it. One of the political parties push for it. It's like if you put it on the mantle, the American public would back it, especially if you push for it, you argue for it, you make your arguments and everything else for it. They don't do that. And so you instead just get health insurance companies that rape you blind. You just get that. I mean, that should tell them something that people apply. Because look, the same people, if it was some random woman who walked out and some guy just killed her, okay, they're not going to applaud that.
Right.
They're not going to applaud somebody being mugged. They're not going to applaud, meaning of all the things of evil, bad things, those people would condemn and they would be perfectly okay with justice being applied to it. And so it's not like these people have some kind of moral deficit or some moral defect. They're seeing this and they're responding to it, almost like if you're watching a movie and the bad guy gets it in the movie and they're like, good job.
How about this? Let me throw another thing at you regarding this.
Mhm.
Look, you brought up a good point. Let's say I can't get healthcare coverage. The family members are dying. My back is bad. I can't get. The doctor says I need an MRI, and the United Health says no, we won't do it.
Yep.
All these things are going on, right? And I go to Congress. I call my Congress member. Hey, member of Congress, can you do anything? They're like, no, screw you. I'm on a payroll of you. Yeah, right. Okay. So it gets to a point where people feel there's no way out. There's no way out. They can do. This guy's just going to keep getting rich. People like him are going to get rich off of my money, and we're just going to keep dying, right? And at some point, when people feel like there's no way out, there's nothing they can do to fix it, at some point, somebody says, well, I got an idea. I would shoot the bastard, right? And they do that. And all these other people who are sitting there saying, I'm not the kind of guy that would ever do it. But
I understand it.
Some other guy did it. They're wicked. Dude, they better not start a GoFundMe page for that guy.
They did.
Oh, did they shut it down immediately?
He's got people have given like thousands of dollars for liturgy.
Exactly. Because bottom line is you have all these people saying, I would never do that. But doesn't that demonstrate a feeling? Like you were talking about with Europe, with foreign policy.
Yeah.
Hey, man, we don't want all these wars, or we don't like genocide. Screw you. You get no say here. Well, we'd like our health insurance to at least cover us for the things that they claim. Screw you. We're paid by them. You push people to a point that violence at some point seems inevitable. I don't know.
What they say, if change becomes impossible, revolution becomes inevitable.
Yeah. JFK something like, if you stop peaceful revolution or peaceful change, you make violent change, or the same thing.
Yeah. And it's true. And is it a revolution? I would argue, yeah. At least in the spirit of revolution and the way they're using the term. I mean, they're using the term in the sense of an overthrow, this kind of violent takeover of sorts. And this is a violent action. It may not necessarily revolutionize anything, but it's the spirit of that revolution of, I'm putting a bullet in somebody because I can't get the shit to change. Shouldn't be anything different. And then you went to McDonald's and hit on the hostess or something. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, he kills somebody, then goes to McDonald's and pulls his mask down in order to sweet talk the woman, and then they get a picture of his face because he does it. It's God, man, it feels morally weird. So it feels so morally weird because my instinctual feeling is F that guy. By the same token, it's like, I don't want to condone vigilantism either. It's a weird feeling.
Well, with me, it's like this. If you take yourself out of it and say, okay, it happened, putting a moral value on this is not going to change it. This is just something that happened. Right. Let me just look at it and see what I think. Apart from whether I think good, bad, right, or wrong, I always oppose violence against other people. I don't think it solves anything, right? But if I see something, I try to figure out why the hell did that happen. And I think and it's getting worse. They're creating a dynamic where people feel they got no way out, right? And what could be more obvious than health insurance? That's day to day. I'm not a young man. Something could go wrong with me today or tomorrow. I have to get checked regularly. Prostate checks, blood pressure checks, checked for diabetes. You know what I mean? Half the time I go see the doctor in my age, they're like, well, you're right on the edge. Oh shit, not that. I'm on the edge of everything, right? But my point being, these things are of great concern to most Americans, who most of
Yes.
us are on the edge of something or over the edge. Everybody's got some health issues. So everybody looks at that and says, therefore, but by the grace of God goes me. Oh my God, what am I going to do when I ask them for medication and they won't give it? So we all have a connection to that. And everybody looked at it and said, fuck him. He got what he had coming to him. Maybe they'll listen to, you know what it was? How about the old T-Mobile or Verizon app? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear. Yeah, right. Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me now? Hey, will you do something about it? No way. Bam. Can you hear me now? That's what it seemed like. At any rate, Jamarl Thomas, tell everybody where they can find you. And by the way, we're simulcasting. I'm looking right now. Watch this. I'm looking at your channel right now, and Jamarl has 205 people. Right here, we got 685 people here. Look at this, man. This is great.
Badass.
Yes, sir, man. Jamarl Thomas's channel is just spelled Jamarl Thomas. So if you're a member of my channel, Jamarl and I have been the best of friends for many, many years. Certainly go over there and sign up for his channel. So we're going to be weekly. We're going to do this kind of stuff. As you can tell, we're good friends and we have an absolute blast doing it. Notwithstanding
Got me a radio, man.
there or not.
Like I said,
we have a lot of fun.
I will go to my dying deathbed being appreciative of that. No, that you got me a radio, man. Like I said, it's hard to it's the weirdest thing in the world. I remember that first day because I think it was, I forget her name. She called and was like, "Hey, would you like to come up to DC?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I come up to DC." And I think the first day I got into a fight with Lee on air about something, and I was hooked. Oh, I was hooked. I was like, "This is fantastic." No, man, I appreciate it to my dying day. I really do.
Yeah,
And
well, you know what? You had,
idea,
the
by the
show,
way.
you had the progressive soapbox, right? And
Mhm.
like everything you put out, I watched. And so I'm
Did
watching.
you?
Chris, and at some point, I'm like, I wonder if this guy would come on. So I forgot who the girl who was,
Yeah.
what's her name? Cameron.
Cameron.
And I said, hey, Cam, do you think you could try to find this guy? We'd love to have him on. She got in touch with, she said, oh, he's going to come on. And I'm like, great. When's he going to come on? She goes, oh, no, he's coming to the studio.
Yeah,
I'm like,
driving up.
really? And then you started coming up weekly. And next thing you know, you were there.
It's like this Negro is here all the time. Give him a job.
They had one or two choices. Either they could hire you and charge you rent or charge you rent.
Right.
We're there.
right.
One or two choices.
Right. One of the
All right,
other.
dude. Everybody.
Man, thank you for this. This was a good
Jamarl
idea.
Thomas.
If you want, we can do it every Friday. I'm down for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what we got to do, man? We got to add somebody else. I'm going to try to get Danny Haifong or somebody else. We need to get like 3 or 4. I was talking to him about that. 3 or 4 channels. And we all like run it simultaneously on all of our channels and have a blast and just chat. And instead of, yes, I'll check maybe Russell Dobular over there. Dude, this we'll ask some people, right? But instead of getting like the normal guests that we get on, the Scott Ritters and people of the world, we just like do it with us. And we just kind of, I think that'd be fun. All right, dude, I'm going to try to get in touch with a couple of people. That would be a lot of fun. All right.
You have a good one, man.
See, you know, we're starting, don't you? We are starting, believe it or not. Years from now, people will look back and say, you know, this gigantic news, the alternative news network or whatever it ends up being called. Yeah. You know, it just started with a couple of guys who started running things on the same channels and then more people. And before you know it, all of these people were running stuff. And before you knew it, YouTube was flooded with everybody running this stuff at the same time. And they took it. They took the corridor, New Jack City, right? They took the corridor.
All right.
All right, dude. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Man. Be safe.
Enjoy yourself. Share this on all your social media platforms. And of course, do you have Patreon? How can people I'm also on
Patreon. I think on Patreon it's called the Progressive Soapbox. If they come to my channel, under my videos, I have all of the links where they can support. Definitely share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that stuff.
And support these channels, support Jamarl, support myself, support your YouTube guys, because particularly Jamarl and I, this is all we do. This is what we do. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everybody. Share this. We're out.